Hi there, it's Neil from Diagonal Move here. Today I'm going to take a look at the components inside Iron Blood, Snow and Mud, a new game from Phalanx Games. It's an introductory two-player hex encounter wargame. It's set during World War II on the Eastern Front and covers the time period from where the Soviet Union was first invaded by the Axis powers through to the point where the Soviets pushed back the Axis back into Germany. The game is for ages 14 plus and takes around 60 to 90 minutes to play, and it is a two-player game. On the back of the box here we have a bit of blurb around the situation and the features of the game, with some of those features flagged being that it is an introductory level game. There's depth and replayability though. A game that is quick to learn but difficult to master is probably the best way to describe this. It has innovative mechanics and standout art and components, so the art on the box certainly meets that description, but let's have a look at some of the other things inside. The components here begin with a Stalin shaped meeple. We have the ever helpful bag full of bags, some dice which are actually D3, they're custom D3 dice. There is a full colour rulebook, one player aid which has the sequence of player things on one side and an obstacle table on the other. Look at that in more detail in a minute. A single sheet of counters. These are pre-cut counters. There'll be no fiddling around with hobby knives or anything like that for this particular game. And there's just the one sheet, but they are pretty thick counters. I'll look at that shortly in a moment too. And then finally we have a map, an actual board map. Starting a closer look at some of the counters in Iron Blood, Snow and Mud with a look at the counter sheet. It is a reasonably thick counter sheet. The counters do come out quite easily. I've punched a few of these out with my thumb already just in handling for this video. We have a few different things on here. There is some Air Force counters for both sides, Navy counters for both sides, control markers, what represents partisans, counters representing fortresses, and then we have tanks and infantry for both sides. The counters are all double-sided with a different illustration on the front, and you can see that some of those control markers are double-sided to represent certain features on the game. When you take an industrial area, for example, you would use this reverse side of those control markers. The counters down the bottom here are generals, which do provide you with a bonus when you use them in combat or at other times depending on the type of counter. As you can see, they fall out really easily. They're all pre-cut. There'll be no need to get your counter clippers out for this particular game. Looks very good, all very clear as far as I can tell, and there are no factors or strengths or anything like that printed on these particular counters. Okay, let's have a look at some of the other bits and bobs. We have a player aid. I think I alluded to it earlier. We have the sequence of play and notes regarding movement, combat resolution and combat dice in this particular side of the player aid, as well as the victory conditions. The victory conditions being to control Axis territory, or if the Axis player does not win, should you be the Soviet player, and for the Axis player you need to control the city where Stalin is located, or you have destroyed one fortress and gain control of either Moscow or 3 industrial centres at the end of the game. So there's a few different victory conditions there for each side. On the reverse of this is an obstacle table which shows how terrain affects the different type of movement that you get in the game, and there are a few different types of movement in the game which we'll see when we look at the rulebook, and then also how they impact supply. So it's quite a useful table there to use when you are playing the game. The rulebook is full colour, has lots of illustrations and examples in it, as well as quite large print text there. A bit of glare, but you can see the text there is quite large print, and gives you plenty of examples of how to set the game up with it. It is just the one scenario. It's the full Eastern Front campaign in the game. It's just that scenario. However, there are plenty of sort of terrain examples and examples of movement and things like that when you get into it. Multiple different types of movement, including single space movement called advances, convoys, where you can link movement together based on other members of the army that you have in front of you. You sort of chain movement together basically, and then blitz, which applies to tanks, and we also have some rules regarding combat, which essentially roll those d3 and whoever has the higher number wins. Nice, easy to read and clear to understand examples. There are multiple phases in the game and multiple different turn types in the game, but it all comes across in this rulebook really nicely and is easy to read and to understand what's going on, I find anyway. And there is an optional rule to help the German side deal with the partisan element of the game. Essentially what will happen is you'll have the Soviet player can place partisans behind the enemy lines, and then you have a bit of a problem there as the Germans did to deal with supply and so forth, and that allows the newer players to effectively deal with that threat, that optional role. So the rulebook is very good, very clear, and really does encourage the reader to play the game. Okay. Finally, we have the map. It is a mounted map, and some interesting features on here, which I will go through. So on the top we have the turn track, and there is a few different types of turn. Hopefully you can see, but we have the mud turns, the clear, and then the snow turns or the winter turns, and they impact different types of movement, which is indicated by those little red symbols at the top. You can't convoy, you can't and certain other things during the mud season, but you can't use your aircraft during the winter season, and so on. And each turn will have multiple different seasons with different effects on movement and so on. And effectively what will happen, just like it does in all the East Front games, is the German side will flow across the board and then flow back across as the game progresses. The game does have this helpful phase reminder, because there are multiple phases in the game, the way you place your support units, your sort of your movement and so on, and supply. It's all very helpfully listed on the board. Okay, that though is this unboxing stroke component overview of Iron Blood, Snow and Mud. It is a very fun game to play. I have played it already, and it is a game I would heartily recommend if you're looking to introduce people to the board wargaming hobby. And I really am looking forward to getting this to the table and giving some examples of a playthrough video in the future. Until then, I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you next time.